cold case project is an effort at a new kind of investigative journalism, which we think can get to the bottom of more of these cases. And this plea that we had Monday, we also hope can provide a little bit of momentum towards looking at some of these other cases. The FBI has at least 60 that they are still holding open.
Well, John Fleming, we also have Congressmember John Lewis, also from the Atlanta area, but speaking to us from the Congress right now. Congressmember John Lewis is the Senior Democratic Chief Deputy Whip. He chairs the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Oversight. Well, we're going back in time, Congressman Lewis, but just 2 days ago, James Bonard Fowler pled guilty to 1 count of second-degree manslaughter 2 weeks before he was to go on trial on 2 counts of murder in the '65 shooting of Jimmie Lee Jackson. You knew Jimmie Lee Jackson. You were at his funeral, Dr. Martin Luther King. Tell us about the significance of this plea this week.
Well, this is a significant breakthrough. There are so many of these cases, cold cases, that have been lingering for some time unsolved. And I was delighted and pleased to see the defendant come forward. I remember that period so well. I was very much involved in Marion, Perry County, and Selma, Alabama during those days. And when Jimmie Lee Jackson was shot and later died at a local hospital in Selma, Alabama, it was a very sad and dark hour for the civil rights movement. And we made a decision to march from Selma to Montgomery to dramatize the fight that this young man had been shot and later died because he was part of an effort to gain the right to vote for all of the citizens of Alabama.
Congressmember Lewis, describe the funeral for Jimmie Lee Jackson.
The funeral of Jimmie Lee Jackson was very sad. In this little community in the heart of the Black Belt of Alabama, Marion is the home of Coretta Scott King, the home of the late Mrs. Andrew Young. It was like the capital of the Black Belt. So hundreds and thousands of black people from all over the Black Belt, but from all over Alabama and the South, came to the funeral. And that day was a gloomy day. It rained. And we walked from the church after Dr. King had delivered the eulogy to the cemetery, carrying his body to be buried. We knew then that his death and his funeral would become the linchpin, the spark to continue to fight for the right to vote. So Jimmie Lee Jackson's funeral was very sad, and his death, but he didn't die in vain. As it was said before, this young man was a veteran, a young leader in the movement there, participating in a nonviolent protest. And in America, whether it's in Selma, Alabama, or in Marion, Alabama, or in Washington, D.C., we have a right to protest in a peaceful, non-violent fashion. And in my estimation, he was executed by this state trooper.
Do you feel satisfied with the sentence of 6 months and 6 months probation?
Well, I'm not satisfied. When you take the life of a person, you should serve more time. But hopeful this brings some closure, that people at least know who did it. I don't buy the story that this state trooper said that he thought Jimmie Lee Jackson was going to grab his pistol and shoot him. I don't buy that. The people that participated in this march in Marion, as well as in Selma a few days later, was committed to the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence.
Then talk about the Selma to Montgomery march, where you were so badly injured, your skull was fractured, that this happening right before that, the killing of Jimmie Lee Jackson, Congressmember Lewis.
Well, on March 7, 1965, we made a decision that we were going to march in an orderly, peaceful, nonviolent fashion from Selma to Montgomery. And along with one of Dr. King's staff members, a young man by the name of Jose Williams, I was asked to be one of the leaders of the march. We participated in a nonviolent workshop, and then 600 of us lined up in twos to walk all the way from Selma to Montgomery. We crossed the Alabama River, crossing the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and when we got to the highest point on the bridge, down below we saw a sea of blue, Alabama state troopers. And we continued to walk. And we came within hearing distance of the state troopers. And a man identified himself and said, "I'm Major John Cloud of the Alabama State Trooper. This is an unlawful march. You will not be allowed to continue. I give you 3 minutes to disperse and return to your church." And Jose Williams said to the major, "Major, give us a moment to kneel and pray." And the major said, "Troopers, advance." And you saw these men putting on their gas masks. And they came toward us, beating us with nightsticks, bull whips, trampling us with horses, and releasing the tear gas. I was hit in the head by a state trooper with a nightstick, and I had a concussion at the bridge. I thought I was going to die. I thought I saw death. That Sunday became known as Bloody Sunday. A little more than 45 years later, I don't recall how I made it back across that bridge, through the streets of Selma, back to that little church that we had left from. But I do remember being at the church, and I stood up and said something like, "I don't understand it, how President Johnson can send troops to Vietnam and cannot send troops to Selma, Alabama, to protect people who only desires to register to vote." And that afternoon, 17 of us hurt and sent to the hospital where I stayed about 3 days.
Congressmember John Lewis describing the Selma to Montgomery march. Jimmie Lee Jackson is buried at the Herd Cemetery, an old slave burial ground next to his father. Since his burial, his headstone has been vandalized, bearing the marks of at least one shotgun blast. On his stone is written the words, "He was killed for man's freedom."
Well, Jimmie Lee Jackson, along with so many others, must be looked upon as the fathers and mothers of the new America. His death, with others, helped liberate not just a people, but a nation. And because of what he did and so many others did, President Johnson came to the Congress, made a dramatic speech, unbelievable address to the Congress, presented the Voting Rights Act. The Congress debated that proposal, passed it, and on August 6, 1965, President Johnson signed it into law. So I say, if it hadn't been for the struggle of individuals like Jimmie Lee Jackson, Viola Liuzzo, and the 3 civil rights workers in Mississippi, and so many others, and what the Congress and what President Johnson did and said, President Barack Obama wouldn't be president of America today.
Just before President Obama became president, in January of 2008, he spotted you standing right nearby. The reports are he embraced you. This was an historic moment. You who had spoken at the 1963 March on Washington, his address in Denver at the Democratic Convention was on the 45th anniversary of that historic march, with King giving his "I Have a Dream" speech and you giving a more radical address. And now today, You are the senior Democratic Chief Deputy Whip. You chair the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Oversight, but the House has shifted, and you will be in the minority. Your thoughts on what needs to happen and where the Republicans and the Democrats are going right now?
Well, as members of Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, we must come together in a bipartisan fashion to look out for the needs of all of the American people. We must get our economy moving again. We got to create jobs and put our people back to work. But we must come and work together. That was the message back in 1965 when we came together as a country and passed the 65 Voting Rights Act. That was the message in 1964 when we passed the Civil Rights Act, and 1968 when we passed the Fair Housing Act. And we can come together again and do good for the American people and look out for the common good.
Republicans have refused to meet with President Obama now this week at the White House. Your thoughts on this?
Well, I'm shocked and dismayed that the Republicans couldn't find the time to meet with the President of the United States. It's a tradition. When the President calls, we tend to drop everything that we're doing and respond to that call and meet with the President.
Congressmember John Lewis, I want to thank you very much for being with us. We just finished a conversation about torture before this segment, about Guantanamo prisoner on trial in New York, and ended with the question about Guantanamo not closing. And President Obama, though it was one of his first promises, ultimately it remains open. Your thoughts?
I think we must close it. It is a blight on the conscience and the soul of America. We need to do it, and we need to do it now.
What's stopping President Obama from fulfilling his promise?
Well, I think he need help and support for the Congress, but he could, in my estimation, issue an executive order and just make it happen. Just do it.
And the war in Afghanistan, your position on the surge and how the U.S. will get out of Afghanistan?
Well, I'm opposed to war. I think war is obsolete as a tool of our foreign policy. We need to bring all of our young men and our young women home and put an end to the violence abroad.
Do you think President Obama should not have escalated the war and should stop it now?
Well, I do not, and I did not, and I do not now support the escalation of the war. We must stop it and end it now.
Congressmember John Lewis, thanks very much for being with us. Democrat from Georgia, who's speaking to us from the Capitol Rotunda, senior Democratic Chief Deputy Whip, chairs the Ways and Means Subcommittee on Oversight, though that will change. Final question, Congressmember Lewis, and that is your colleague, Congressmember Rangel, who has just been convicted on ethics charges by the Ethics Committee in the House. Your thoughts?
Well, it is very sad to see this happen to a friend and a colleague, my former chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. But the members of the committee have spoken, and it would be revealed, I guess, within the next few hours, the next few days, what would be the punishment.
Thanks for being with us, Congressmember Lewis. This is Democracy.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. When we come back, former chief spokesperson for Cigna, now a whistleblower, talks about how the insurance industry targeted Michael Moore when he came out with his film Sicko. The strategy, push him off the cliff, said Wendell Potter.